Good morning, it's Sunday morning and last night was actually daylight savings and I didn't know about it, so we sprung forward and I woke up and I was like, how is it already 8 o'clock? I have a lot of projects to do today. You can see behind me the project that we worked on yesterday. I've got the seeds under my grow lights from last year for now until we get the 3D printed frame for the actual light that I'll be using done and put together. So for now, this is what we're rocking with. Hopefully be able to change that out today. So that's one project that we're gonna hope to finish today. Also, going to do some cooking. I'm gonna be making homemade beef and cabbage rolls. And this is one of my favorite foods. It kind of sounds gross, beef and cabbage rolls, but I promise it's good. It's very Midwestern. I use frozen dinner rolls for the dough for the beef and cabbage rolls. So I need to get those out of the freezer, get them set out and get them thawing and rising. Once they're risen, we're gonna have to cook up the onion, ground beef, cabbage, get everything seasoned and stuff them. It's kind of a really long project. It'll probably take like 4-5 hours if you count in the rising and also the cooking and putting it together. Actually, what takes the longest is rotating out the trays. So once you have one tray of them done, you have to let it rise for another 30 minutes, put in the oven, and then you got to do it all over again. So usually I have about 3 trays worth of Runzas, and I can only cook 1 tray at a time in my oven. So it's a very long project. It's going to take a big portion of the day off and on, but it'll end me up with about 16 to 18 beef and cabbage rolls that I can keep in the freezer and keep eating probably this week and next week. So that is one of my favorite foods to meal prep, and so we're gonna get rocking on that. All right, we're in the kitchen. I say we because my cat, Ferguson, has just walked in behind me. First thing I need to do is get the frozen dough out of the freezer. So this is what I use for the dough for my beef and cabbage rolls. So I'm gonna get this started off by getting these all placed out on a couple pans and letting them thaw and rise. Fergie, you're not a part of this project, but you could say hi. He's like, give me that food. So first I'm gonna lay down parchment paper on these pans. I'm gonna spray them with cooking spray here. Place these roughly like 1 to 2 inches apart because they pretty much double in size. Sometimes more than that. Then you're gonna take plastic wrap and you're gonna spray the plastic wrap with cooking spray and spread it across the top of these so that while they rise, they don't stick to the plastic wrap. This part's kind of challenging because when this stuff starts to stick to itself, it's really hard to work with. I found the easiest way is to start with them facing up and then spray it and flip it over. that over. Alright, so now that these are covered and ready to rise, I'm going to go take them and put them in my little laundry room back there for two reasons. One, it's a little warmer in there, help them rise a little better, and two, my cat will step on them if I don't do that. So I'm going to take those in there, and then I will meet you back here when these are a little closer to being ready to go and we start making the other components of the meal. After the dough had risen for about 2.5 hours, I went ahead and started preparing the vegetables, chopping them up and getting them ready to cook. So I cut up this head of cabbage, and I did use probably 3/4 of it, maybe even a little bit more than that when it came time to cook it. And then I also am going to chop up a yellow onion, and I use the entire onion. When it comes to this beef and cabbage roll recipe, I use a mixture of a recipe that I found online and also one of my uncle's recipes that he sent me, and I kind of just take what I want from each of those recipes and have made my own at this point. So don't really do a lot of measuring, kind of just measure by the eyes and by the heart, and so that does make it a little bit difficult, but I'll try to give you my best guess on how much I use of different things. For this recipe, I use 2 pounds of ground beef, so I go ahead and get that ground beef all cut up and broken up and cook that until it's fully cooked. And I drain a little bit of the grease, but I leave most of it, and I keep the grease on hand because I do end up adding a little bit of it back in as the cabbage cooks and soaks up that moisture. Season the ground beef mixture, I use 4 different seasonings. There's a Lowry's garlic salt, Nature Seasonings, cookies, and then a Lowry's seasoned pepper. And I am putting a tablespoon of that Nature Seasoning, about almost a tablespoon of the garlic salt, about a half a tablespoon of the cookies, and a half a tablespoon of the seasoned pepper. And I mix that together, and I put a tablespoon, and I think I add a little bit more that I just don't show here, about a tablespoon and a half of that mixture to the ground beef before I start adding the vegetables. And then once I add the vegetables, I add another tablespoon after they've cooked. So I set that aside and I wait until the cabbage and the onion have cooked into the mixture, and then I add those seasonings, a little bit more of the seasonings at a later time. Now that the veggies are mixed into the ground beef, I am going to put a lid on it and have the heat on medium for 10 minutes. And I just let that cabbage cook down and into that ground beef mixture. That is when I add in the extra tablespoon of seasoning, and you'll see I don't use all of my seasoning, but I do taste and add a little bit more as I go along. After feeling like I'm at a good place with the seasoning, I then add some Worcestershire sauce and some soy sauce, and I just put a little bit in. I don't like when those flavors are overpowering. I just want a little bit of a hint of them in there so that it can bring some different flavor to the ground beef mixture. At this point, the dough has been sitting out for a little bit over 3 hours, and honestly, they've more than doubled in size. I think I've let them set out a little bit too long, but that's not really a big issue. So it's still easy to work with. I put out a little bit of flour on my cutting board, and then I go through and roll it as flat as I can, but you don't want to get it too thin because then when you go to fold it over itself, it will tear. So then I put 1/3 of a cup of that ground beef cabbage onion mixture in with some cheddar cheese. In this one, I used half a slice, but in most of them, I put a whole slice in there. It just getting into the swing of what fits in these rolls is sometimes difficult. So you'll see I just roll it out, add 1/3 of a cup of a mixture, and I put half of the cheese down first, then add that mixture, and then half of the cheese on top. The folding of these beef and cabbage rolls is not a science, it's more of an art. So I just take two opposite sides, fold them together, and then the adjacent sides, fold those in, and just keep pulling the corners to the center until they've all kind of sealed up at the center. And I press down on it, and then I just flip it over and set it down on the greased parchment paper on a tray, ready to go for that second rise for another 30 minutes. You want to make sure while you're making up your beef and cabbage rolls that you're keeping the dough that you're not using covered. That keeps it workable. Otherwise, it can dry out and get hard, and you don't want that to happen. That makes them very difficult to work with and to stretch out to a good size. So keep those covered while you're working as best you can, and pretty quickly after you get them onto the pan that they're going to cook in, you want to cover those back up for that second rise. So once I get this tray over there on the right full of beef and cabbage rolls, I take some of that saran wrap that I was using earlier and just wrap it over those and set them aside. After they have finished rising for 30 minutes, I cover them in some melted butter before putting them into the oven. And the oven temp is 375, and I put them in for between 20 to 30 minutes. You can kind of tell when they're done visually. So you just want to put them in there and keep an eye on them when it hits that 20-minute mark to see and make sure that they're not getting too dark on the top. If it looks like they're getting dark on the top, but the sides are not quite getting cooked through, you can tint them with a piece of aluminum foil to keep the tops from getting too dark. But that wasn't an issue for me this time. Something I also like to do is I typically have about 1/2 pound of the ground beef cabbage mixture left over. I like to take that, put it in a bag, and throw it in the freezer. And what I do with that small amount of beef and cabbage roll mix is I put it into a baking dish and cover it with what are those called? Like the croissant dough that you can buy in those cans. I just cover the dish that I put that mixture in with those croissant rolls just flat and then bake them, and then it's like a beef and cabbage casserole, which is also phenomenal. While I'm waiting for the beef and cabbage rolls to cycle through the oven. I was lucky enough to have some time to clean up the kitchen and get ready for the week. It is a Sunday, so I like to make sure that my dishwasher is cleared out, sink is clean, and ready for the week. So I had some time to do that while waiting in between these beef and cabbage rolls cooking in the oven. So here's my second batch of them, adding the butter to the top, and I'm gonna put them in the oven as I'm taking the first batch out. Alright, so the last batch of Runzas is in the oven, and I've got one ready for me to eat right now. It's kind of wonky because this one didn't seal up very well, so I'm gonna go ahead and eat this one right now. So here's the inside of them. Very cheesy, very excited. So good. They never miss. So I just pulled the last of the Runzas out of the oven, and I've got them cooling off behind me, but in total I made 18. I already ate one, so there's currently 17 now. But they're delicious and highly recommend giving them a try. Now all I've got left to do is to get all of those bagged up and put in the refrigerator or the freezer. And then I'm still hoping that I can get to starting the rest of those seeds today, but my feet hurt. I've been on my feet for, let's see, I've started this project at roughly 2 o'clock and it's almost 5. So 3 hours of waiting for them to rise, putting them in the oven, watching them in the oven, and I did 3 batches. So that is what took so long, but it's so worth it. 17 meal prepped Runzas will last a little while here, and they're delicious. One of my favorite meals. I can't say no to cheese and bread and any kind of combination. So thanks for hanging out with me in the kitchen. Let's transition to the garden. So turns out I did not have any time to get to starting any more seeds or doing anything with my gardening stuff. I did get the frame that I'm 3D printed for the light finished. Well, I should say Tate did that. I did not do that. But I haven't put it up yet. I'm saving that for the next video. So stay tuned on that piece of it, putting up the light and starting a few more seeds. Hopefully I'll be doing that in the next week or so, so look out for that video. Anyways, thanks for hanging out with me. I hope you give this recipe a try, and please let me know if you love it as much as I do.